What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of BassQuest, coming at you from the little desk here in the wheelchair again. Continuing this theme of summer to fall transition. And one of the things that I wanted to talk to you guys about is the power of a jerkbait. You guys have heard me preach for a few years now that a jerkbait is a year-round bait. It excels in cold water, but it also excels in catching fish that are suspended or fish that want to feed up, which happens all throughout the year, whether it's shad spawn, mayfly hatch, you name it, or say it's a fish on isolated cover such as docks or isolated timber, and especially this time of year on schooling fish. And if you have something like forward-facing sonar, it can be even better for this. But one of the things that you have to do a lot of times is kind of get sneaky with the jerkbait that you're throwing. So a lot of times these fish that have been beat up, again, we're talking about these larger schools of fish that have pushed shallow off of ledges. And so they've been there for a while. Some of them stay relatively shallow most of the year. Some of them kind of push off as the ledge bite kind of dies down. And a lot of these fish will the deep fish will move to these shallow schools and actually reinforce them. So you'll have a school that maybe had 50 fish in it all summer will suddenly have 100 fish, 150 fish. And you'll have mixes of white bass and everything else in there. So this time of year, a lot of times the bait is still relatively small. So matching the hatch with a jerkbait is much more difficult. However, you can use some tricks to break up the profile in order to get those bites. And another thing that's really important is cadence. So first thing we'll talk about breaking up the pattern. You can see this, I got the Shimano World Minnow here. This is a pro blue color, and you can see it's opaque in nature. It might have a little bit more white on the bottom, but you can actually break up that white by scratching some of the pigment off there and give the illusion that there's more bodies there. Because a lot of times, especially big fish in these schools, they're not going up there after singles. What they're doing is they're going up there, they're letting the school fish come up, busting on top, whether it's white bass and small bass, are breaking up the school of shad. So you'll see this big round school of shad that's popping on the top, and all of a sudden, here's a foot wide school, here's a foot wide school, here's a 6-inch wide school, and there might be, in 6 inches, there might be 15, 20 shad in there. That big fish is always going to be right on the outside of the school, and it's going to come up and just center that whole school. And so that's one of the things that you really have to consider that makes it difficult to get those fish to hit unless they're completely fired up, because they're looking for one instance in order to come up and feed. So one of the things that I'm looking for with this is profile. So we're talking about the actual texture or color of the bait, something opaque. You can see here's a Vision 110. It's that pearl color, but see how opaque it is? It breaks up the color pattern. It's the same thing when you're throwing a spook on these really finicky fish. A lot of times a clear spook is really good, or a clear spook that has a little bit of color on the top, a little bit of color on the bottom kind of deal. This is a Demiki. I think it's the Abyss. It's a little bit deep runner, and you see the theme here. So I've got shallow runners, mid runners, deep runners. You have to customize the jerkbait that you have according to the depth that the school is in. Some of these schools, they might be sitting anywhere from 8 to 15 feet, and they're only willing to come up a certain distance. So you might have to have a couple of these tied on. A lot of times this time of year, I'll have one or two tied on a jerk or a bait caster, and a couple of them tied on a spin rod, and that can be really effective. Another one that's interesting that I'm super excited to try out this year, I actually got this for my Michigan trip from Talking Tackle over there. And this is a mega bass. It's called it's real hard to say the name here. It's an X Nanahanahan or something like that. I'll let y'all look at that. See that? Anyway, I'll link it below so you can see, but they've got some of these over at Talking Tackle. It looked like a trout bait to me, but I was like, man, I could throw this on my straight 6-pound test and be awesome for smallmouth. But now looking at it, it dives. You can see that bill. This thing dives relatively deep, goes down 2 meters, so it's about 6 foot and some change. And on these schooling fish in the fall, I would be really excited to try this, especially in the shad pattern. And then one of my all-time favorites, if the fish are really aggressive, so you're getting first thing in the morning, afternoon, this Jackal Re-Range is awesome. It is loud. That's the one thing I don't like about it as much for late fall fishing. But the more muted stuff is what I want to use then. And another one that I break out a lot in the fall time and catch a lot of good fish on it is a Megabass 110 Silent. I just don't happen to have one. I'm limited on what I can get out of the boat right now, unfortunately. Thankfully, I had some of the stuff that I had in my box. So that's the cool thing about this series. You guys are seeing what's in my box from literally right before the accident. This is the stuff that I intended to use as my little kit that I took in people's boats and stuff. This is my little mobile kit that I intended to use through this transition. I just didn't get the chance to, obviously, because I forgot my Superman cape at the house when I jumped off that roof. Anyway, so hope y'all enjoyed that. Hope that helps out a little bit on the jerkbait playing field there. So I'm going to link some down below of the ones that I kind of recommend, but that's the main thing. So we're talking about the color on there, the depth. So, being consistent on knowing where those fish are going to be in that depth range. And the other one that I forgot to talk about is cadence. Now, one thing that's really interesting about, a jerkbait is you're able to work it really slow in one place. That's what we do in cold water a lot. However, like in the shad spawn and mayfly hatch, we might be popping that thing more aggressively, not pausing it as much. I have found that in the fall time of the year especially, these fish are wanting to chase. So I'm going to incorporate, instead of just popping the bait, I'm going to incorporate a pull, kind of like you're running a Carolina rig down there, a pull or burn. You burn, stop, burn, stop. And some of these baits, especially the Re-Range, the World Minnow is really good at this too. It doesn't blow out. So you can burn it, pause it, and it's going to stay there. And you can twitch it once or twice. So what I'm going to try to do, I'm envisioning this wolf pack of bass down here, right? That jerkbait burns down through there, they're right on its tail, and then it pauses and pops to the side, and that's when they're going to eat it. So you have to visualize that and see if you can make those fish bite. But most people don't think to reel a jerkbait at all. But it's extremely effective in a lot of different times of the year, but especially during the late fall transition with a more or a less intrusive bait on there. So hope you guys enjoyed this. And as always, I hope this week finds you out on the water. And I'll catch you there. It might be a couple or 3 months, though, before I catch you there. But I'm doing my best. I'm doing my best.